Nothing says marital bliss like finding your wife's burner phone in the washing machine at 3 in the morning. I'm Marshall Dyer, 43 years old, financial analyst by day, insomniac by night, and apparently husband to a woman who thinks discretion means hiding her second phone in dirty laundry. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The phone buzzed against the metal drum like a fading insect. Water had seeped into the case, but the screen still flickered with life. One unread message from C glowed in the darkness of our basement laundry room. Can't wait to taste you again tomorrow night. Same place, same time. Your devoted contractor. I laughed. Actually laughed out loud in that damp, detergent-scented cave beneath our house. 22 years of marriage, and Dana thought she was being clever with a flip phone from 2005 and pet names that wouldn't fool a teenager. The devoted contractor had to be Colby Crane. He'd spent 3 weeks last month fixing our back fence, a job that should have taken 3 days. I'd wondered why Dana suddenly developed such an interest in home improvement, bringing him iced tea and lingering by the kitchen window to watch him work. Now I knew she wasn't admiring his craftsmanship with wood. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, phone in hand. Dana lay sprawled across our king-size bed, her auburn hair fanned across the pillow like she was posing for a magazine shoot. Even in sleep, she looked calculated. Perfect. Untouchable. Wake up, sweetheart, I whispered. Her green eyes fluttered open, immediately focusing on the phone in my hand. I watched her face cycle through confusion, recognition, and finally that cold defiance I'd grown to know so well. It's not what you think, she said, sitting up and pulling the sheet to her chest like she was protecting her virtue. The irony wasn't lost on me. Really? Because I think it's exactly what it looks like. You're sleeping with Colby Crane and you're both dumb enough to leave evidence. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, suddenly animated. Marshall, listen to me. It just happened. We didn't plan it. You're never here, you're always working or at that disgusting gym with those losers. So it's my fault? I'm not saying it's your fault, but we haven't been happy for years. You know that. We're like roommates who split the mortgage. I held up the phone. Roommates don't usually call each other devoted contractor and make plans to taste each other. Dana stood up, wrapping the sheet around herself like armor. Don't be crude, Marshall. This is exactly why we have problems. You reduce everything to the lowest common denominator. The lowest common denominator is you screwing the help while I pay the bills. Her face flushed red. Colby isn't the help. He owns his own business. He's successful. He treats me like a woman, not like a business partner. He's married, Dana, to Lydia. Remember her? The woman who brought us that casserole when your mother was in the hospital? Lydia doesn't understand him. I actually snorted. Jesus Christ, you're using cliches now. What's next? He's going to leave his wife for me? He is, actually. We've talked about it. The confidence in her voice hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't a fling or a moment of weakness. She'd been planning a whole new life while I balanced our checkbook and fixed the garbage disposal. How long? I asked. Does it matter? How long, Dana? She looked away. 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies, half a year of her coming home to me after being with him, half a year of me being the fool who believed her excuses about working late at the boutique. I want you out, I said. This is my house, too. Then I'll leave. Marshall, wait. She reached for my arm, but I stepped back. We don't have to do this the hard way. We can be adults about this. We can work something out. Like what? Like a civilized divorce. Split everything 50-50. No lawyers, no drama. We tell people we grew apart. I looked at my wife of 22 years, standing there in our bedroom, wrapped in Egyptian cotton sheets I'd bought her for Christmas, planning my exit strategy like she was firing an employee. Sure, I said. Let's be civilized. 3 days later, I was sitting in Frankie's gym, wrapping my hands for a session with the heavy bag. The place smelled like sweat, leather, and broken dreams. My favorite combination. Frankie Torino, 72 years old and still built like a fire hydrant, was holding court near the speed bags, telling the same story about sparring with a young Roberto Duran that we'd all heard 100 times. "You look like hell, Marshall," said Tommy Reeves, a local plumber who came in to work off beer weight. "Dana finally figure out you're ugly?" Something like that. I'd been coming to Frankie's for 15 years, ever since I turned 30 and realized my metabolism wasn't going to save me from middle age. It was the kind of place that didn't exist anymore. No juice bars, no yoga classes, no membership fees that required a second mortgage. Just heavy bags, speed bags, and men working out their problems with their fists. "Women," Frankie said, walking over. "Can't live with 'em, can't bury 'em in the backyard without the neighbors asking questions." "She's cheating on me," I said. The conversation around us stopped. Even the rhythmic pounding of gloves on leather paused. In Frankie's world, there were only two unforgivable sins: ratting out a friend and cheating on your spouse. "You sure?" Frankie asked. "Caught them red-handed. Well, caught the evidence red-handed." "What are you going to do about it?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Mr. Dyer, this is Lydia Crane. I think we need to talk." Colby's wife. I stepped outside to take the call. "Mrs. Crane, I'm sorry about—" "Don't apologize, not to me. Can you meet me somewhere? Tonight?" "Where?" "Murphy's Tavern. You know it?" I knew it. Dive bar on the edge of town, the kind of place where conversations were private and the bartender minded his own business. 8 o'clock? I'll be there. Murphy's Tavern looked like it had been decorated by someone who'd given up on life around 1987. Wood paneling, neon beer signs, and a jukebox that only played songs about heartbreak and drinking. Perfect for our purposes. Lydia was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a whiskey in front of her. She was smaller than I remembered, maybe 5'4", with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, and the kind of tired eyes that came from too many sleepless nights. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. "I'm sorry about Colby and Dana. I just found out myself." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I've known for 3 months. I hired a private investigator." 3 months? Colby's not as smart as he thinks he is. He left credit card receipts from hotels, changed his phone password, started working out again. She took a sip of whiskey. Men always think they're so clever when they're cheating, but they're really just obvious. "Why didn't you confront him?" "Because I wanted to be sure, and because I wanted to destroy him properly." The way she said "destroy" made me pay attention. Lydia Crane wasn't just angry, she was calculating. "I have photos," she continued, sliding a manila envelope across the table. "Hotel receipts, GPS tracking from his truck, bank records showing cash withdrawals that matched the dates they were together." I opened the envelope. The photos were explicit enough to make me close it quickly. "Jesus, Lydia. Your wife is very photogenic. What do you want from me?" "I want them to pay. Both of them. I want them to lose everything they care about, their reputations, their businesses, their friends. I want them to understand what it feels like to have someone you trust rip your life apart." "And you think I can help with that?" "I know you can. You're a financial analyst. You understand money, investments, business structures. Dana's boutique isn't as profitable as she pretends, and Colby's contracting business has some interesting tax issues." She was right. I'd been doing Dana's books for years, and there were definitely some creative accounting practices that wouldn't survive an audit. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A partnership. You handle the financial destruction, I handle the social destruction. By the time we're done, they'll be broke, friendless, and unemployable in this town." I looked at this woman I barely knew, sitting across from me in a dive bar, proposing to systematically destroy our cheating spouses. 6 months ago, I would have walked away. 6 months ago, I still believed in taking the high road. "I'm in," I said. Over the next 2 weeks, Lydia and I became unlikely partners in revenge. We met every few days, usually at Murphy's, sometimes at a coffee shop in the next town over. She was methodical, organized, and absolutely ruthless. Qualities I was learning to appreciate. "I've been tracking their routine," she said during one of our meetings, spreading photographs across the table like she was planning a military operation. "Tuesdays and Thursdays, Colby tells me he's working late. Dana tells you she's doing inventory at the boutique. They meet at the Riverside Motel on Route 9. Classy. It gets better. The motel charges by the hour and they always pay cash. But Colby's too cheap to pay for a full night, so they're usually done by 9:30. How do you know all this? I followed them, twice. The first time I was going to confront them, but then I realized this was better. Let them think they're getting away with it while I document everything. I had to admire her patience. If I'd had those photos, I would have confronted Dana immediately. But Lydia was playing a longer game. "What about the financial stuff?" she asked. I pulled out a folder of my own. "Dana's boutique is in trouble. She's been using the business credit card for personal expenses, dinners, hotels, clothes that never made it into inventory. If the IRS audited her, she'd be looking at fraud charges. Can you make that happen?" I can make it likely. Anonymous tips about cash transactions, unreported income, questionable deductions. Even if nothing comes of it, the investigation will tie up her assets for months. And Colby? Colby's been paying some of his workers under the table, no taxes withheld. He's also been inflating material costs on insurance jobs and pocketing the difference. I have documentation going back 3 years. Lydia smiled for the first time since I'd known her. "You're better at this than I expected." "I'm motivated." "What changed your mind? About taking the high road, I mean." I thought about it. Dana asked me to be civilized about the divorce. She wanted to split everything 50-50, like she deserved half of what I built while she was screwing around behind my back. That's when I realized she doesn't see this as betrayal. She sees it as a business transaction. So we're giving her a different kind of business transaction. Exactly. That night I went home to our empty house. Dana had moved in with her sister, temporarily, while we worked things out. She'd taken her clothes, her jewelry, and about half our furniture, but she'd left the photos. 22 years of marriage reduced to images on the mantelpiece that neither of us wanted to look at anymore. I poured myself a scotch and sat in my recliner, looking around the living room that suddenly felt like a museum of my former life. The couch where we'd watched Sunday football games, the coffee table where we'd done taxes every April, the bookshelf full of novels Dana bought but never read. My phone buzzed. Text message from Dana. "We need to talk about the house. Can you meet me tomorrow?" I texted back, "Sure, Murphy's Tavern, 8 o'clock. Can't we meet somewhere nicer, like Benedetto's?" Benedetto's was where we'd had our first date, our anniversary dinners, every celebration for the past 2 decades. The idea of sitting across from her there, pretending to be civilized while she planned to take half of everything, made me sick. "Murphy's or nothing," I typed. She didn't respond. The next evening, Dana showed up at Murphy's looking like she was attending a funeral. Black dress, minimal jewelry, somber expression. She'd always been beautiful, but now she looked like a stranger wearing my wife's face. "This place is awful, Marshall." "It's honest. No pretense, no bullshit. Seems appropriate." She ordered a white wine that Murphy's definitely didn't stock, settled for a beer, and immediately started her pitch. "I've talked to a lawyer," she began. "Of course you have. He says we can do this quietly. No-fault divorce, equitable distribution of assets. I keep the boutique, you keep your retirement accounts, we split the house and savings." "What about your boyfriend?" "Colby isn't part of this conversation. He's part of this marriage ending." Dana sighed like I was being unreasonable. "Marshall, I know you're hurt, but dragging this out won't help anyone. We can both move on with dignity. Dignity? Yes, dignity. We had 22 good years. We don't have to destroy that because we grew apart. We didn't grow apart, Dana. You decided to start screwing the contractor while I was at work paying for your lifestyle. Don't be crude. Don't be a cheating whore. The words hung in the air between us like a slap. Dana's face went white, then red, then settled into the cold mask I'd seen more and more often in recent years. I don't have to listen to this, she said, standing up. No, you don't. But you will have to listen to my lawyer, and the IRS, and probably the state tax board. She sat back down. What are you talking about? I'm talking about your creative bookkeeping, Dana. Using business funds for personal expenses, unreported cash sales, inflated deductions. Should I go on? You wouldn't. Try me. We stared at each other across the scarred wooden table, two people who'd once promised to love each other forever, now negotiating the terms of mutually assured destruction. What do you want? She asked finally. I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to realize that betraying someone who trusted you isn't a victimless crime. And I want you to stop pretending you're the reasonable one in this situation. And then we'll see. Word travels fast in a small town, especially when it involves closeness, money, and betrayal. Within a week of my conversation with Dana, half the town knew about the affair, and the other half was pretending they didn't. I first noticed it at the grocery store. Conversations stopped when I walked down the aisles. People I'd known for years suddenly found their shoes fascinating when we passed each other. The checkout girl, normally chatty, rang up my items in silence. But it was at Benedetto's restaurant that things came to a head. I was having dinner with my friend Jake Morrison, a guy I'd known since college. We'd been meeting for dinner once a month for 15 years, talking about work, sports, life. Normal guy stuff. But tonight felt different. So, Jake said after we'd ordered, I heard about you and Dana. I figured you had. That's rough, man. Really rough. Yeah, well, it happens. Jake shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. Look, Marshall, I need to tell you something. Sarah and I, we've been friends with Dana for a long time, before you two even met, actually. Sarah was Jake's wife. They'd all gone to high school together, part of that tight circle of local kids who'd never really left town. Okay, I said. And Dana's really torn up about this whole thing. She says you're threatening her, trying to destroy her business. I put down my fork. She said what? She's scared, Marshall. She thinks you're going to ruin her life. She ruined her own life when she started cheating. But threatening her business? Come on, man. That's her livelihood. Her livelihood built on fraud. Jake leaned forward. Listen to yourself. This isn't you talking. This is anger talking. Dana made a mistake, but she doesn't deserve to have her whole life destroyed. A mistake? Jake, she's been screwing Colby Crane for 6 months. That's not a mistake, that's a choice, a series of choices. People make bad choices when they're unhappy. So it's my fault? I'm not saying it's your fault, but maybe you both could have tried harder. I looked at my friend of 25 years, sitting across from me in the restaurant where Dana and I had celebrated our 5th anniversary, and realized he'd already chosen sides. You know what, Jake? You're right. I should have tried harder. I should have tried harder to notice that my wife was lying to me every day. I should have tried harder to be okay with her stealing from our joint accounts to pay for hotel rooms. I should have tried harder to be a good sport about being betrayed by the person I trusted most in the world. Marshall, no, I get it. Dana's the victim here. Poor Dana, trapped in a loveless marriage with a man who worked 60 hours a week to pay for her boutique and her BMW and her girls' trips to Napa Valley. Poor Dana, forced to seek comfort in the arms of a married contractor because her husband was too busy being loyal to be exciting. Jake's face was red. You're being unreasonable. I'm being honest, something you and Dana seem to have trouble with. Look, Sarah and I care about both of you, but But you've decided Dana's version of events is more convenient to believe. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed. You want to talk about fair? Fair would be my wife talking to me about our problems instead of talking to Colby Crane's dick. Fair would be my friends asking for my side of the story before deciding I'm the villain. Fair would be 22 years of marriage counting for something. I stood up and threw 2 20s on the table. Dinner's on me. Give my regards to Dana at the next dinner party I won't be invited to. As I walked out of Benedetto's, I could feel the eyes of every patron following me. By tomorrow, the whole town would know that Marshall Dyer had lost it at dinner, that he was bitter and vindictive, that poor Dana was right to be afraid of him. Perfect. Lydia called me the next morning with news that made my confrontation with Jake seem like a minor inconvenience. They're planning to leave town, she said without preamble. What? Colby told me last night. He's been offered a job in Portland, Maine. Big construction project, 18-month contract. He wants us to make a fresh start. And Dana? According to my sources, she's been looking into selling the boutique. Quietly. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning an escape. A whole new life, funded by the assets they'd accumulated during their respective marriages. When? I asked. Soon. Maybe 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Not enough time for IRS investigations or tax audits or any of the slow-moving, bureaucratic revenge I'd been planning. If we were going to act, it had to be now. Meet me at Murphy's tonight, I said. We're accelerating the timeline. That evening, Lydia and I spread our evidence across the booth like generals planning a battle. Photos, financial records, witness statements, documented lies. Enough ammunition to destroy both of them if we used it right. The key is coordination, I said. We hit them simultaneously from multiple angles so they can't coordinate their defense. What do you have in mind? Tomorrow is the monthly Chamber of Commerce breakfast. Dana never misses it. Too many potential customers. Colby will be there too, schmoozing for contracts. So that's where we make our presentation. Lydia smiled. Public humiliation. Better, public truth-telling. I'd been a member of the chamber for 10 years, served on the board, knew all the local business owners. They trusted me, respected my financial expertise. When Marshall Dyer stood up to make an announcement, people listened. What about afterwards? Lydia asked. They'll try to discredit us, claim we're just bitter spouses making things up. That's why we need insurance. I pulled out my phone and showed her a video file. I installed a camera in Dana's office at the boutique. Technically, it's still half mine until the divorce is final, so it's legal. I've got 3 weeks of footage of her and Colby using the back room for activities that definitely aren't business-related. Jesus, Marshall. And I copied her computer files before she changed the passwords. Every fraudulent transaction, every falsified receipt, every cash payment that never got reported. If she tries to claim I'm lying, I'll release everything. What do you need from me? I need you to keep Colby busy while I'm making my presentation. Can you do that? Oh, I can do better than that. I can make sure he's exactly where we want him when we want him there. The next morning, I put on my best suit, the navy blue one Dana had bought me for our anniversary, and drove to the chamber breakfast with a flash drive in my pocket and 22 years of rage in my heart. The Riverside Inn's conference room was packed with the usual suspects. Local business owners, a few politicians, the mayor's wife, and assorted community leaders. Dana was at her usual table near the front, wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payment. She looked confident, relaxed, like a woman who thought she was about to get away with everything. Colby sat 2 tables away, laughing at something the bank president had said. He wore a sport coat that didn't quite fit his broad shoulders, and a tie that looked like it came from a gas station. Even dressed up, he looked like what he was. A guy who worked with his hands, trying to play in a white-collar world. After the usual announcements and committee reports, Chamber President Helen Walsh asked if anyone had new business to discuss. I stood up. I have something to share with the group, I said, walking toward the front of the room. It's about business ethics, fiduciary responsibility, and the importance of trust in our community. Dana's face went pale. Colby stopped laughing. As you all know, I'm a financial analyst. I've been doing books for local businesses for 15 years, helping people navigate tax law, investment strategies, compliance issues. It's work I take seriously because I understand that trust is the foundation of any business relationship. I plugged the flash drive into the room's presentation system. Unfortunately, I've recently discovered that someone I trusted completely has been violating that trust in ways that affect not just me personally, but this entire business community. The first slide appeared on the screen, a bank statement showing a $3,200 withdrawal from Dana's business account, dated the same day as a hotel receipt I'd found in her purse. This is from Elegance Boutique's business account. The withdrawal is listed as office supplies, but as you can see from the corresponding receipt, the money was actually spent on a hotel room. Dana stood up. Marshall, stop this right now. This isn't an isolated incident, I continued, clicking to the next slide. Over the past 6 months, there have been dozens of similar transactions. Business funds used for personal expenses, cash sales that were never reported, inflated deductions for non-existent business expenses. The room was silent. Every eye was on the screen, watching Dana's financial crimes laid out in spreadsheets and bank records. The total amount of fraud exceeds $20,000, I said. Money that should have been reported as income, taxes that should have been paid, business expenses that were actually used to fund an extramarital affair with a married contractor who has his own interesting relationship with tax law. Colby was on his feet now. You snake? Mr. Crane, I said, clicking to a new slide showing his company's payroll records. I'm glad you're here. I think the group would be interested to know about your employment practices, paying workers under the table, inflating material costs on insurance jobs, using unlicensed subcontractors on projects that require certified professionals. This is harassment, Dana said, her voice shaking. He's doing this because we're getting divorced. He's trying to destroy me. I'm not trying to destroy anyone, I said calmly. I'm simply presenting facts. Financial records don't lie, bank statements don't have emotions, and tax law doesn't care about anyone's personal feelings. Helen Walsh looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. Marshall, perhaps this would be better handled privately. It would have been better handled privately if my wife had talked to me about our marriage problems instead of embezzling money to fund her affair. It would have been better handled privately if Mr. Crane had divorced his wife before seducing mine. But since they chose to make their relationship a public matter, meeting at local hotels, flaunting their affair at community events, I think the community deserves to know the full truth. I clicked to the final slide, a photo of Dana and Colby in a passionate embrace outside the Riverside Motel, timestamp clearly visible. This was taken 3 days ago, while Mr. Crane was supposedly working late on a job site, and while Ms. Dyer was supposedly doing inventory at her boutique. They were actually continuing their 6-month affair at a motel that charges by the hour. The silence in the room was absolute. Dana was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. Colby looked like he wanted to hit me but knew he couldn't with 50 witnesses watching. I've forwarded copies of all this information to the appropriate authorities, I said, unplugging the flash drive. The IRS, the State Tax Board, the Better Business Bureau, and the Licensing Board for Contractors. I'm sure they'll be very interested in conducting their own investigations. I walked back to my table, sat down, and took a sip of coffee like I'd just given a presentation on quarterly earnings, instead of destroying 2 people's lives in front of their entire professional community. Dana and Colby left the room together, her sobbing, him swearing under his breath. The remaining 48 people sat in stunned silence until Helen Walsh finally managed to adjourn the meeting. As people filed out, several stopped by my table, some to express sympathy, others to ask for copies of the financial documents. A A few to quietly mention that they'd suspected something was wrong with Dana's books for months. But it was what happened next that made the whole thing worthwhile. By noon that same day, Dana's boutique had lost 3 major suppliers who'd seen the chamber presentation. By evening, Colby's construction company had been dropped by 2 clients and was facing an emergency audit by the state licensing board. But the real damage was social. In a small town, reputation is everything. Dana and Colby hadn't just been caught cheating, they'd been exposed as thieves, tax evaders, and liars in front of everyone who mattered in the local business community. The story spread through coffee shops, beauty salons, and bar stools like wildfire. Dana called me that night, hysterical. "You destroyed me," she sobbed into the phone. "You destroyed everything I worked for." "No, Dana, you destroyed everything you worked for. I just showed people what you'd already done." Those financial records were private. They were business records for a company I co-signed loans for. Legally, I had every right to access them. You humiliated me in front of everyone I know. You humiliated yourself. I just provided documentation. I'll sue you. This is harassment, defamation. Sue me with what money? Your business accounts are frozen pending investigation, your suppliers have dropped you, and your landlord is probably going to evict you when he finds out about the tax problems. Good luck finding a lawyer who will work pro bono for a tax cheat. She hung up on me. Colby tried a different approach. He showed up at my house the next evening, drunk and belligerent. "You think you're so smart," he slurred, swaying on my front porch. "You think you won something." "I think I exposed 2 people who thought they were smarter than everyone else. Dana loves me. She's going to leave you anyway. Dana's going to leave town, probably tonight, before the IRS freezes her personal accounts too. And you're going to lose your contractor's license and probably face criminal charges for tax evasion. You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about. I also know that Lydia filed for divorce this morning and that she's claiming half of everything you own, including that truck you're so proud of." His face crumpled. "Lydia wouldn't." "Lydia's smarter than both of us, Colby. She documented everything, saved every receipt, recorded every lie you told her. By the time she's done with you, you'll be lucky to keep your tools." He tried to take a swing at me, but 20 years of sobriety had left him slow and unsteady. I stepped aside and watched him stumble into my hedge. "Go home, Colby. Sleep it off. Tomorrow you can start figuring out how to rebuild your life without lying to everyone in it." He staggered back to his truck, took 3 tries to get the engine started, and drove away weaving slightly. I made a note to call the police with his license plate number. Drunk driving was just another bad decision in a long string of them. The next morning, I met Lydia for coffee. She looked different, lighter somehow, like she'd been carrying a weight that was finally gone. "It's over," she said. "Colby's moving back in with his mother. The business is finished. He'll probably have to declare bankruptcy." "And Dana?" "Gone. Left town yesterday afternoon. Her sister says she's going to stay with their cousin in Arizona until things blow over." "Things aren't going to blow over." "No, they're not." We sat in comfortable silence for a while. 2 people who'd been betrayed by the people they'd trusted most, who'd chosen revenge over forgiveness and found it satisfying. "Do you think we're terrible people?" Lydia asked. "I think we're people who refuse to be victims. The whole town thinks we went too far. The whole town was happy to gossip about our cheating spouses, but didn't want to deal with the consequences of that gossip. They wanted the entertainment without the responsibility. Jake Morrison stopped by yesterday. He said you'd lost perspective, that you were letting anger make you cruel." I laughed. Jake Morrison, who decided my wife's version of events was more believable than mine before he'd even heard my side. Jake Morrison, who thought I should just accept being cheated on and lied to because confronting it made people uncomfortable. "What did you tell him?" I told him that perspective is a luxury you can only afford when you're not the one being betrayed. When someone you love and trust systematically destroys your life, perspective becomes less important than justice. "And anger?" Anger is just love with nowhere to go. I loved Dana for 22 years. When she decided that love wasn't worth her fidelity, that anger had to go somewhere. I chose to direct it at the people who'd earned it, rather than letting it eat me alive. Lydia nodded. Colby kept saying I should forgive him, that everyone makes mistakes, that we could work through it. But forgiveness without consequences isn't forgiveness. It's enabling. Exactly. We finished our coffee and walked outside into the bright morning sun. The town looked the same as it had a week ago, but everything felt different. Dana's boutique was closed, a for lease sign already in the window. Colby's construction trucks were gone from their usual spot outside Murphy's Tavern. "What now?" Lydia asked. "Now we get on with our lives. We find out who we are when we're not defined by other people's betrayals. Are you going to stay in town?" "For now. I like my job, I like my gym, and I'm not going to let other people's bad choices drive me away from the life I built. Even though people think we're the villains in this story, let them think what they want. We know the truth, and the truth is that we refuse to be victims of other people's selfishness. If that makes us villains, I can live with that." 3 months later, I was back at Benedetto's, having dinner alone and reading a book. The restaurant was busy, filled with couples and families and groups of friends enjoying their Friday night out. Jake Morrison walked in with his wife Sarah, saw me, and quickly looked away. They were seated across the room, but I could see them whispering, probably debating whether to acknowledge me. I didn't care. The waitress, a young woman I didn't recognize, brought my check and smiled. "Excuse me, but are you Marshall Dyer?" "Yes." "I just wanted to thank you. My mom worked for Dana at the boutique. When you exposed what she was doing, it turned out she owed my mom 3 weeks of back pay and hadn't been paying into her unemployment insurance. The state made her pay everything she owed before she left town. I'm glad it worked out. My mom was afraid to say anything because she needed the job, but she knew something wasn't right. You gave her the courage to speak up." After she left, I sat back in my chair and looked around the restaurant where Dana and I had celebrated so many anniversaries, where I'd thought we were building a life together while she was planning her exit strategy. I thought about the people who'd called me vindictive, cruel, obsessed with revenge. I thought about the friends who'd chosen sides without hearing my story. I thought about Dana and Colby, probably somewhere warm and sunny, telling each other that they were the real victims in this situation. And I realized I didn't care about any of it. For the first time in months, I felt free. I paid my check, left a generous tip, and walked out into the cool evening air. Tomorrow I'd go to the gym, work on my books, maybe call a woman I'd met at the coffee shop. I'd live my life on my own terms, with my integrity intact and my conscience clear. Dana had taught me an important lesson. Sometimes the people you trust most are the ones most capable of betraying you. But I'd learned something else, something she'd probably never understand. The best revenge isn't destroying your enemies, it's building a life so good that their betrayal becomes irrelevant. But sometimes, before you can build that life, you have to clear away the wreckage of the old one. And sometimes that means making sure the people who created the wreckage face the consequences of their choices. I'd done both.